Today I'm going to show you how I decorated this Minecraft cake. Come join me. So there are multiple different types of cake in here. This is a 3-layer chocolate cake with an orange cake and also some vanilla cake. I'm adding some cake pops as well. So this is some cake pop dough. I'm going to be cutting them into little tiny squares because this is Minecraft. I'm going to be trying to create some small blocks that I will put onto the cake once it's finished. So right now I'm just putting the cake pop dough into a cookie sheet and kind of flattening it out so that I can make strips and then cut those strips into little blocks as you see me doing right here. Once I have those into little blocks, I'm dipping them. I'm doing some in brown, some in gray, and some in green so that I have multiple colors to add to the final cake board once I'm done. So once I dip them, I'm just putting them onto the cookie sheet and letting them harden, and then I will come back to these once I get closer to being finished with the cake. This is a piece of vanilla cake that I had cut down, and I had put some icing on the outside of it just to begin the process of coloring this into the color that I need it to be. So I'm making it into a square right now. And then I'm going to be adding buttercream icing until I get it into the shape that I need it to be. Here I am adding some buttercream to that cake. After I get this layer on, I will put this into the freezer to let it harden up a bit, and then I'll do it again so that I can get that nice and smooth square that I will use for the cake. I was planning on putting 3 of these on the cake, but it ended up not having enough space on the cake, so I only added 1. Instead, you'll see what I do in a bit. So I'm moving on here to making an Xbox controller using the orange cake, and I'm using a template that I had drawn onto a piece of wax paper to cut and carve this piece of the cake. Once I have this carved down to the shape that I like, I'm going to cover it in buttercream. And then I will smooth out that buttercream, and then I'll put it into the chiller so that it can chill enough to be able to smooth out and add additional layers of icing to get this just the way that I want it as far as smoothness with the icing. After I get this done, I'm moving on to stacking the cake. So as I mentioned, this is a 3-layer chocolate cake. So I'm putting some icing on the cake board so my cake doesn't slide as I'm decorating, and adding that first layer. Then I'm adding some buttercream, and I'll smooth that out. And then I'm going to add my second layer of cake. Adding more buttercream, and then I will again smooth that out a bit. And then I'm going to add that third layer of cake, and I will cover this cake with my crumb coat. So I'm just putting that icing on and smoothing it down over the top of the cake, and then adding more icing to the sides to smooth that out. And I'm going to allow this to chill, and I'm moving on to working on that piece of cake again. As I said, I'm trying to get that done in layers because it's hard to handle just a piece of cake. So I will add some buttercream, chill it, add some buttercream, chill it. Now that it's the shape that I want, I'm using some edible spray paint and spraying this green. I will ultimately attach a character face to the front of this. As I mentioned, I was going to do 3 of these. I ended up only having room for 1 on the cake. I'm going back to my controller and adding my last layer of icing to it. This is my the icing that's going to really smooth out and finish up this cake. So now I am moving back to my chocolate cake, and I'm taking off that excess icing that is on the top, using a knife to cut that so it's got a sharp corner. Now I'm moving on to my final coat of my colored icing, and this is really kind of like a maroon brick colored icing, and I'm going to smooth that out a bit. Then I'm going to chill this and begin working on some of my fondant pieces. So these are the pieces that I'm making for my Xbox controller. So the little buttons that have the A, B, X, and Y, and I'm making that little plus sign, and as well as just the decorations that go alongside of that go on top of the Xbox controller. So for the round pieces, I am doing a black bottom and then adding a white circle on top of those so that you can see those standing out since it is a white controller. Now I'm starting to attach those pieces together. So I have that bottom black piece, and then I'm attaching a white piece on top using some water. And now I'm adding another piece of black onto 2 of the black circles to make it look like there is a knob to move the players in the games. Just as an FYI, I'm quite congested, so that's why my voice sounds the way that it does today. Here I am using some edible markers to draw on the A, B, X, and Y on the buttons on the Xbox controller. And now I'm beginning to add those pieces onto the cake. I did add some white lines to that top black circle to make it look like an X, like the Xbox logo. I'm using my paintbrush to move those pieces around. That helps to control them a bit. Here I'm drawing the little icons that belong on those center two buttons on an Xbox controller. And then I'm adding those and using, like all the other ones, I used some piping gel to attach them to the cake. Now I'm just drawing in some of like the design that goes on an Xbox controller to give it some of that shape that they have. So I have a line on the top and a line on the bottom, and I'm just reinforcing the color on those two buttons. So here are some edible images, as I mentioned. I was adding some things to square cakes. Ultimately, I only had space for one. Here I'm cutting out a pickaxe in an edible image. I am rolling out some fondant and I'm putting those edible images on top of that, and I will go back and cut those out again. I just want to reinforce those edible images. Did the same for the Minecraft logo. And here I am cutting that out of the fondant. Here I'm just cutting out some of those details in the logo. I am now cutting out the pickaxe from the fondant. Here I'm cutting out the one character that I do ultimately end up using. I also am using the chicken and the pig, but I will attach them to the side of the cake. Here I am using a 9-inch pan, and I'm cutting out a piece of black fondant that I'm going to put on top of the cake. So the sides are that brick color, and then the top will be black. Here I am brushing that black with some Crisco so that the color is much more vibrant. get that powdered sugar off of the fondant. Here I am adding the last layer of that red icing so I can finish up this cake. And then I'm smoothing this out to make it nice and smooth for the finished product. And then I realized I wanted to put this icing onto the top of the cake. I was just going to put it on the sides, but decided I wanted to put it on the top just to add some extra icing to that top. And with that, I am smoothing that out the rest of the way so that it is ready to be decorated. So now I'm going back to working on the Xbox controller, and I'm adding a piece of black fondant to the top just to add additional decoration to this small cake. And once I have that on, I will use some Crisco again to rub it onto this piece of black fondant so that it looks nice and vibrant in color. And then this part of the cake is complete. So now I am moving on to work on some of the images that I'm going to put on the side of the cake. I have printed out 8 edible images that have different worlds from the game. And so I'm just kind of cutting out some fondant rectangles that I'm going to put these edible images onto. I do end up cutting some of these world pictures down into 3 that I will place on the cake. And the other ones I leave whole. Once I have those all cut out, I'm using some water and I'm going to attach each one of those game worlds onto each one of these rectangle pieces of fondant. When I was choosing which ones of these I wanted to use, I was trying to pick some that had like multiple different colors. I didn't want it to be all one color. So I have one in red, one in orange, one that's green, one that's blue, one that seems more white, one that has some pink in it. So really just trying to get a mix of colors for this cake. And now I'm adding some dowels to the cake to make sure that it can support the things that I'll be adding to the top. So I put the first one in, and then to get the right height, and then I'm using that one to measure the other two that I'll be adding to the cake. After I have these added to the cake, I'm going to take some of that same red icing, and I'm going to cover up those holes that are left from the dowels. And then I'm going to add some extra icing just to make sure that those dowels don't come through the fondant that I'm going to be putting on top of this. And now I'm going to add that piece of black fondant that I cut out a little bit ago. And here I'm just pushing that fondant out to the side of the edge so that it meets the edge of the cake. Now I'm beginning to use some piping gel to adhere those pictures of the worlds from the game onto the side of the cake. So I'm putting whole ones. I started putting whole ones on the bottom, and then once I got to the last part of the bottom row, there wasn't enough room to put a whole nother one. So then I started to be a bit more creative in how I added those to the cake. You see there's not enough for two more in this space that's remaining right here. So I put one in the middle, and then I cut one of the other world pictures into three, and then I added one of those third pieces into each side of the one I just placed. And then the pieces that are remaining, I kind of place those on the next layer up. But I wait to do that until I add the Minecraft logo, which I'm doing right now. And now I'm going to space those remaining pieces around the sides and back of this cake. Getting ready now to put the Xbox controller onto the top of the cake. I'm pushing that down a little bit. Now I'm adding that green block that I had made, and I'm adding that character to the front of it. As you can see on the board, there's not enough space for those other two cakes that I had talked about, so that's why I just took them off. Now I'm picking him up, adding some icing to make sure that it sticks and stays in place. And there we have that. I'm using a little bit of paint here to just clean up where my fingerprints went on that block. So I'm adding the pickaxe to the top of the cake as well. Here I am using a paintbrush to clean up the green that had touched the Xbox controller. So I used some piping gel to add that pickaxe. You'll notice I added a pig and the chicken to the front of the cake, and now I'm adding those cake pops that I had made at the very beginning of the video, those blocks onto the cake board. And I'm just adding them randomly to the cake. And the last thing that needs done is I'm just adding the name James. This is for my nephew. Happy birthday, James. I really hope he likes this cake, and this is what it looks like. If you enjoyed watching this video, I encourage you to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any future content that I might make. And here's one last look. Thank you again for viewing and joining me.